All right, Wagwan holding by Pirkei Avos, ethics for our fathers, as it is known. Again, one Wagwan holding by Pirkei Avos, ethics for our fathers. We are in Perek Beis. We're in the second chapter. We are in Mishna 16, and that we've been going through for a while. This is, I guess, number 19 or more, or 20, whatever it is. And I'm sure there's going to be a 21, 22. 23, 24. The Mishnah says, the name of Rabbi Yeshua, that Rabbi Yeshua says, evil eye, evil inclination, hatred of other people, remove a person from this world. So we've been speaking for the last number of weeks about basically the evil eye, jealousy, that it can literally take a person out of this world. And we've been speaking quite a bit about Rabbeinu Yonah, that Rabbeinu Yonah here says that wise person jealous means he's not happy with what they have. You see that, let's say, friend is wealthier, they're, seeing a better spouse, better kids, whatever. It causes, as we said before, it causes damage to them. It causes damage to others, right? He says, brings down the experts of nature, would say that it's going to contaminate a person's thoughts, going to eat them up alive, so to speak. And again, it's a lack of emunah, essentially. It's a lack of belief and faith in God, that God gives us whatever we need, and basically destroys the person's body. It's going to make them feel depressed. They won't be able to function. And it'll take them out of this world, and they don't see the good, right? They don't see the good in very much, in too many things. So we've been mentioning the idea we spent last week. We spoke about the idea of the Torah prohibition, one of the 10 commandments, lo sachmun, right? You're not allowed, right? You're not allowed to covet. Now, what does it mean? What does it mean to covet? What does it mean to covet? Even, let's say you convince somebody to sell something, right? And let's say they're not interested, right? They're not interested in selling for whatever reason, and you convince them, right? Even though the person sold, he didn't sell willingly, essentially did not sell willingly, right? So at the end of the day, if he took you to Beis Din, he took you to the rabbinical court and said, well, bottom line, you sold it to me, right? That's true. 100%, you sold it to me, so it's a good sale. Right? We spoke about that. Even, the prohibition can be even if you sell it, even to get, you bother someone, to sell it, and you chepper them, meaning you're always on top of them when you're going to sell it. I need to, I want to buy it and this and that. Even if he sells it to you with a full heart, it's a good sale, right? It is a good sale, but nonetheless, you may transgress a Torah prohibition of coveting, right? So that we spoke about last week. So we mentioned before, I want to hit this, I think, a little bit from maybe a little bit, different angle, because we've hit this from a lot of different angles. But the Mishnah Perek Avos later, which we've mentioned before, the Mishnah later says that Miu Sameach B'Chelko. Sorry, Miu Asher. Just gave the answer. Miu Asher, who is considered rich, Misha Sameach B'Chelko. They're happy with what they have. They're happy with their lot. So now you understand that they're not missing anything. They're not worried, what someone else has. And again, if a person would, and they say life's not fair and all this, right? We've spoken many times. It's a lack of emunah. It's a lack of belief and faith in God. That basically a person saying God doesn't know what He's doing. God forbid, I'm getting the raw deal, right? The raw deal over here. Why should this be? But I was thinking earlier, about this whole idea. So you got two things going on. You got someone who's rich, right? You have someone who's rich and someone who's poor, right? Usually nothing in between. You got, I'm not saying dirt poor, different levels, whatever it is. But But you have someone who's rich. Now, if they're rich, are they thankful for what they have? Are they haughty? Yeah. Are they conceited? Do they help others? Yeah. And if someone's poor, are they happy even with the little that they have? Right? It's a test on both sides, right? On both sides of the coin. Now, that being said, we mentioned this many times. You're gonna say, okay, what's the novelty here? What's my novelty here? On both sides, nobody should be happy. Yeah, that's a novelty. Why in the world should anybody be happy? You're gonna say, what are you talking about? If somebody's rich, yeah, it means they have all their needs being taken care of. It could be for this generation, for next generation, right? Unless they blow the money, they have money, right? They're not worried where money's coming from. They're rich, very good investments, whatever. They use it wisely. They're not worried about money. Yeah. So on that side, on that side they have everything. But people that have everything have nothing. Probably a problem from their spouse, from their family, from their kids, right? Who knows what? Maybe they have illness, right? Maybe other things. And someone who's poor, barely making ends meet, if that, right? Or, here, it was an interesting thing. Many years ago, there was a stat out that I don't think it's changed dramatically, but a person can be in the red a certain amount in their bank, right? So like, if you took the amount of people that like don't make it to the end of the month, like borrowing against whatever amount they have set up or whatever the case is, turns out to like, hundreds of millions of dollars or I mean, an absurd amount of money. Absurd amount of money. Now, banks are going to make money from that because obviously they charge interest. That's one of the places where they make money. Here you put money in, you pay. You take money out, you pay. Like it's you pay either way. But then again, I don't know if it's like that in every place. But whatever it is, that's how people live, right? Some people better, some people worse, but everyone more or less, is in the same boat. In the States and maybe other places as well. There's a major difference between the people that have and don't. Size of their house, size of their cars, right? They go on vacation, whatever they do. Right? A big difference. Big difference here. Everyone's in the same boat. You have people that have money. I'm not saying not. A person's high tech, they're doing very well. Right? Big industry here and all over. But a lot of people not making so much money. Right? So now on both sides of the coin, what does the Mishnah say? Right? Let's do a little bit of analysis here. The Mishnah says, right? Let's make very clear. The Mishnah says, if I bring it up here, the Mishnah says the name of Rabbi Yeshua, an evil eye. The evil good agent we're going to get to, hopefully. An agent of other people, remove a person from this world. Now, the evil eye means jealousy. That's what it means. You're jealous of someone else for whatever reason. Could be legit. Could be not legit. Could be you just got an axe to grind. I don't know. But I was thinking earlier the following question. And the question is like this. The question is, if a person has a lot or a person doesn't, in either case, are they really essentially happy? In other words, it should come out according to what I was thinking, that nobody in the world is ever happy. Right? Kind of depressing way to look at the world, right? But why would that be? Why would nobody be happy here? Why would I say that? Because if a person doesn't have enough, they struggle on a daily basis, right? On a monthly basis, whatever it is, they don't have enough. They live paycheck to paycheck. A lot of people do. Some people do it better. Some people do it worse, right? But when someone is being squeezed and you got all these bills to pay and you may not know like where money's coming from sometimes, or maybe a lot of the time, and that's how people live. So these people are not whistling Dixie here, right? Not going to be so ecstatic. Like, they're going to say, well, how's life? You're going to say it's the same, but like, in the back of their mind, in the front of their minds, they're getting squeezed like the bottom of the toothpaste, right? As I would say. They're getting squeezed. Not to mention other things going on. Yeah. Now, someone who's rich, they have no worries. They have no financial worries. Very good. But plenty of rich people are miserable. They're miserable. What do they have? Maybe they have a couple kids, drive them up the wall. Who knows? Maybe they have health issues. Maybe they have other things. So I was thinking, okay, I'll take Amuna, the faith and belief in God here. We'll take that out of the picture for a second. How many people are truly happy today? We're gonna say, I'll put on my psychology cap here, right? Even though I'm not a psychologist, never played one on TV, right? I'll put on my psychology cap here. Who in the world is really happy? Because no matter what a person has, even if they have money in the bank and things are going seemingly well, everybody at some level has aggravation in their life. Everybody does, right? There's no exception. Whether it's health, whether it's your kids, whether it's livelihoods, whether it can be a million things, a million different things. So here the Mishnah says that the evil eye, we're going to call it jealousy. You have to go back to, all these videos I spoke about the evil eye and what it represents. But for short, we'll talk about jealousy. Yeah, that in and of itself, whether a person has money or doesn't have money, what's going to happen? Destroy them. It will take them out of this world. It will drive them mad, as Rabbeinu Yonah says. It'll be all-consuming. So who has it easy? Right? Who's going to pass this test over here? It comes on this week's Parsha. We read Parshas Korach. Korach had money. Korach had a certain level of power. Korach came out of Egypt. 120% came out of Egypt. Saw the miracles. Saw God face to face at Mount Sinai, whatever that means. He saw the miracles in the desert. He saw the manna in the desert. Very good. So what's he jealous of Aaron the Kohen? So you say, well, he's not going to be jealous of Moshe, because Moshe was considered the king, and if he came out against the king, they would have killed him. So he wasn't stupid by any stretch. Not only that, he had prophecy. And he had the ark, and he didn't die. So he's got everything going for him. Everything. But what bothered him? Moses played fan favorite here. Right? Or we say here in Israel, you say it anywhere pretty much. Moses gave it to Aaron. Aaron had protection. Connections. Right? If you connected to the king, very good. If you got a good relationship with the king. When I was in high school, senior year, we had to come up with a senior statement. So 12 years of education, my senior statement was, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And money is only a medium of exchange. Now, it's not what you know, it's who you know, it's all about connections. Some of you have more connections, less connections, it's all about connections. Anyone involved in business knows that. Right? You have your own business, it's about connections. You work for someone else, different issue. Right? But it's about connections. Or bringing in people, or whatever it is. Okay. So here, Korah comes, and it's jumping up and down, and he's making fun of Moshe Rabbeinu at the same time. But what happened over here? How did he get so jealous? Yeah, he had everything going for him. But what happened? It says that he was a Pikeach. He was smart. He had Ruach HaKodesh, right? He had prophecy, low-level prophecy, but he had prophecy. Because he saw a thing with the prophet's going to come out of him. So he wasn't a dummy. On the other hand, it says, it's brought down that he was an Apikoros. He's a heretic. So what happened over here? How can it be both at the same time? It's very, very hard to understand. You want to tell me he's a great scholar, right? He's got a lot of knowledge. People respect him. all these good things. Okay. You think you'd be very close to God. So on the one hand, he started out, on that level, right? He worked on himself, whatever, raised himself to a high spiritual level. Very good. Then what happened? Over here, he got jealous. He totally got jealous. And then what did he do? He started asking Moshe Rabbeinu different questions. If I have a prayer shawl, if I have a talus, all the tzitzis are white. What do I need a blue string for? What do I need what we call techelis? What do I need it for? Then he asked if you have a whole library of books, does the room need a mezuzah? Yeah, so he started asking like these bantering type questions. And he brought 250, great scholars with him. And what did he do? He started bantering. He started scoffing. He started mocking. Like, you're talking about Moshe Rabbeinu. The Torah says, we just read a few weeks ago, that Moshe Rabbeinu is what? The most humble of all people. Everybody knew how humble he was. Now, the fact that he comes out against him, and he makes fun of him, again, he's jealous of Aaron Cohen. He's jealous and says, well, I also have connections. I'm also part of that family. So why did I get passed over? Why did Aaron, get the priesthood and not me? I'm just deserving. But didn't he get the message? Didn't the Torah say by the Ber Hashem of Moshe Lemor? God spoke to the Moshe saying, say to the Jewish people, say to Aaron, say to both. What happened over here? Did he not believe in that communication? He believed in it. He saw the miracles. He saw what Moshe Rabbeinu was capable of. And he's still jealous? So you tell me, it's either one way or the other. Either you tell me, he's just a bad egg, and all the way through it just went down, 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 and he became a heretic. Right? That'd be the easy thing to say. Then I have no question. But if you're going to tell me, as the commentaries tell us, it's very clear Moshe Rabbeinu himself, that Korach himself had divine inspiration, right? It's a form of prophecy, low level, but it's a form of prophecy. He had divine inspiration. Not only did he have divine inspiration, he held the ark. He had the ability to hold the ark. Some people held the ark, weren't worthy. They died. They died for the holiness of the ark. Right? The whole question of itself, why? But it doesn't matter. Right? For argument's sake right now, it doesn't matter. They held the ark. Sorry, he held the ark over here. So if he held the ark and he didn't die, he had to be holding somewhere in the world. So you can't say start off the bad egg. Right? He came from a broken home. Right? Yeah. Parents are divorced. He got abused. Maybe psychologically, whatever. Right? He came from, he came from the dirt, let's say. Right? He came from a messed up house. Yeah? Okay, then I could have, there'd be less of an argument here. I can understand. He came from that environment. He never overcame it. And there are people like that. They just, grew up in a bad environment and it followed them their whole lives. They were never able to deal with it the right way. Maybe they didn't get the right help, whatever it is. They had a rough life. Right? I see many times, people on Facebook say, oh, where are you from? So what do they put on their Facebook profile? Put on, I came from the school of hard knocks. Yeah. That doesn't really mean anything, per se, but we all do. Right? We all have tests. Some more, some less, whatever it is. We all have tests. Okay. But if he came out and raised himself to a high level, then we have a major contradiction here. The major contradiction is someone who stays at that level or is at that level doesn't fall into a pit, doesn't forget where he came from, doesn't forget who his master is. And now you're going to tell me, he asked Moshe Rabbeinu these questions. and he feels he's been slighted. Yeah. So it doesn't seem like he's so nice over here. So how can it be both at the same time? So it says, Mori Rebbe, Harav Agon Moshe Shlita should be well. And he brings down his commentary on Chumash, very clear. You're right, he started out that way. And he was on a high spiritual level. And he had the ability to hold the ark. And he had divine inspiration. And he came out of Egypt and he saw the miracles. Beautiful. But what happened? He started out that way, continued that way, and then he went down a slippery slope. The slippery slope was he felt he got slighted. But it's not just he felt he got slighted. So what happens, let's say someone undermines us. Let's say a person works for a company. Yeah, they work for a company. They could be out for a promotion. And what happens? Someone sabotages it. And you know the person who did it. Why'd they do it? They didn't get you fired. Right? Still working for the same company. They didn't get you fired. But they put in a word or who knows what, and they sabotage you getting a raise. And they came in and took it, let's say. Now, you're not looking at that person in a very good way. You get swindled, essentially, because you're going to claim, or anybody would claim, I had a right to that. That was mine, right? I could have gone in and got that. Now, you might have got it, you might not have got it. Okay, it's not 100%, but let's say, what they would make it very easy. They were in line for this. Had nothing happened according to nature, this other person didn't step in. According to nature, what would have happened? They would have got the raise. Significant raise, let's say. So beautiful. They would have got a significant raise. Okay. Now this person came in, and went obviously against your will. They did it for themselves. Paid the Jew in a certain way. Again, you're still working there, but this person came in and swooped what, let's say, rightfully belonged to you. Now, I'm always fond of saying money's great, and people can pledge and say this and say that, beautiful, until you see it in your hand. Until it's in your hand, it's all talk. Yeah, it's all talk. I mean, people may have, the greatest intention, and they say, yeah, I'm going to follow through. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Sometimes it happens. Maybe a lot of times it happens. Okay, sometimes it doesn't. Right? Let's say something happened. Okay. Now, according to this, wouldn't you have an axe to grind? You legitimately would have had an axe to grind. You're gonna say, belong to me. I had that coming. Right? All about this isn't fair. Right? It's not fair. Who cares what's fair? Right? Let's make clear. Who cares what's fair or what's not fair? You didn't get the raise. Okay. Now, what's Torah perspective? Torah perspective is this guy came in, took what was yours, let's say. Now, you can be mad at that person. You can feel you got slighted by this person. Very good. Right? Person can feel that. But the question is, why did it happen? So you say the guy was greedy. He came in and took what didn't belong to him. Okay? But who runs the show here? And this is really the bottom line. Who runs the show? The person who runs the show is God himself. Now, what did God do over here? God did not want this person, let's say in our case, did not want this person to get the raise. For whatever reason. So how did he orchestrate it? Someone came in, in an underhanded way, and took it from him. Again, let's say he was supposed to get it. It didn't happen. Okay. So this person, and we mentioned this many times, always good to repeat, This person's rip-roaring mad at this guy who came, through the back door. Yeah, who swindled him, let's say. So he's rip-roaring mad. Okay. The thing is that even though it's true, and this guy caused some damage, very good. Yeah, in the bigger scheme of things, God did not want him to have this race. So God took this person took it upon himself, but God used him as a pawn, so to speak. Because we say, Harbe Shluchim Lamakom, God has a lot of messengers in the world. So what did God do? He used this person, right? He used this person, right, to get to you. And therefore, he came and swindled and took what you thought should have been yours. Now, is this person looking to God and say, why this happened? No, the person said, I got swindled. And this person's scum of the earth for what he did. Good. Right? And the person had every intention to make sure you didn't get it. Okay. So now, what's this person going to do? He's rip-roaring mad. This person's rip-roaring mad. Right? And he adds it out for this other person. Why? Look what he did. Look at the damage he caused. Look what he did. And he's going to bear a grudge, Torah prohibition, certainly for a Jew. Right? I would say for a non-Jew, it's not a good thing to do. Can they bear a grudge if they want? They can. I would say it's a moral imperative not to. Right? Because, in this case, it's going to eat you up inside. Going to pretty much destroy you. It's always going to be on your mind. It's not fair that this happened. So as we always say, life's not about what's fair or not. Right? I know someone's got a grudge for the last 15 years about something that happened. A bad business advice, maybe took the advice, didn't take the advice, whatever it was. Right? And bellied up. And he's still mad. Still bears the grudge for a lot of reasons. Some of them are legit, but it doesn't matter. Any psychologist will say, get it out of your system. Move on. You can't live in the past. That's just going to eat you up inside. What's the point? Now, again, would I agree they might have an axe to grind? Sure. But even if they have an axe to grind, they don't see the bigger picture. And what is the biggest picture over here? Sorry, what's the bigger picture? The biggest picture is that God's in charge. And he wanted you to lose. I don't want to admit that. Believe in God. Don't believe in God. Right? But they're going to feel slighted. They're going to feel slighted. Now, go back to the Torah. Comes Korach. And Korach feels he's been slighted. He's on such a level. He deserves it. Moshe Rabbeinu showing favoritism. Yeah? Even though it's all a crock. Even though he understands, really, deep down, there's not favoritism here. God's telling Moshe what to do, bottom line. So if God's telling Moshe what to do, he's got no claim. Moshe's doing what he did because God told him. And we understand Moshe Rabbeinu is a scribe. He can't add or subtract to the Torah. It makes very clear. But look at all the miracles he did. God did through him. Look at what he gave over. Look at, it's funny in a certain way. You go through the end of the book of Exodus. The end of the book of Exodus talks about the building of the Mishkan. Now, when it's talking about the building of the tabernacle, it goes into great detail of all the beams, the loops, the clasps, and how it's built, and this and that. Moshe Rabbeinu, the commentaries say, had to take absolute inventory. Why do you have to take inventory? Because people are going to say, he took, God made him rich, right, to the broken tablets. Okay. But nonetheless, they're going to say, we want to make sure he accounts for every last thing. Why? We want to make sure it doesn't take what doesn't belong to him. We're not talking about the average Joe Schmo over here, right? Or John Doe, call him John Doe here, right? We're not talking about the average John Doe here. You're talking about somebody who had the 48th level of understanding. And there are 49 levels. He was at the 48th level of understanding, right? God says he's believed whatever he says. In my house, and in front of 3 million people. The humblest of all people. You're worried he's taking something for himself? You're worried he's taking extra gold and stashing it away? He's going to make millions from it. Really? Moshe Rabbeinu? You told me other people I could hear, maybe. Put someone in that kind of position. Little for God, little for me. Right? Place a little bit to the side. Whatever it is. What are you talking about? Greatest person ever created in the history of man. You're going to sit there and tell me that you're going to have to go through a whole list of everything, of all these ingredients and everything else in order to tell me that he didn't take anything for himself? This is Moshe Rabbeinu. This is Moshe Rabbeinu of all people. Tell me he's corrupt or potentially corrupt of anybody, right? But the Torah tells me, as the commentaries say and explain, he had to take inventory because they were choshen him. They were worried. Maybe he took for himself. Maybe he took some for himself. So there you have to go step by step. Okay, how many looks? How many class? This is what it was. This is what they got. Beautiful. Yeah, but even Moshe Rabbeinu, at his level, the people said maybe, he takes for himself. So let's take an inventory. And mind-boggling. You want to think, okay, that's one thing. But you see over here, what did he do? Who did he give the priesthood to? Who was the high priest? Who was Aaron the Kohen? That just so happened to be his brother. Very good. So what are people going to say? What are some people going to say? It's good to be, related to the king. Because you're related to the king, you get favors. And not forgetting the high priest. What about the fact that God spoke to Moshe telling him, this is what you have to do? How did you forget that? How did you forget all the miracles that God did through Moshe? How did he go through all the things that Moshe said before? What happened to all that? And what's the answer? Went out the window. It went bink out the window. Why did it go out the window? Because he felt slighted. Now, anyone, and I'm sure we've all felt slighted at some level, and, for any number of things. Let's say a person growing up, they thought, there was a school play, they thought they should have got this role. Or, in sports, they thought they should have been on this team. They should have been on varsity or whatever it is. And they feel it was politics, it was other things. It wasn't based on their own merits. Let's say something else happened. So what did that do? Or what did that possibly do? Takes the person up. She's going to say, I had it coming. I should have got this part. Okay, but you didn't. Now, why didn't you? Could have been any number of reasons why. But see, when a person thinks, and they're all caught up, and they think that this is coming to me, and this belongs to me, and this is something I should have, and it doesn't go exactly the way you think, then you say, what's going on? Someone took this, or someone took that, or someone put in a bad name for you. Now, even when any of these things happen, we are first, what's the knee-jerk reaction? The knee-jerk reaction has nothing to do with me. Someone else did this. Someone else did that. That has nothing to do with my efforts, with what I'm capable of doing. Nothing. There's something bigger going on, right? I'll give an example. Use myself as an example here. I was interviewing for a job for an organization many years ago, and the person interviewing me, saw my resume. We spoke about, things I'd done in the past. I had a pretty strong resume. And the person said, openly, like, listen, I'm not looking for someone equal to me or better to me. I'm looking for someone younger. I don't have to pay as much, right? And it's not going to outshine me. Yeah, or, someone I can train. Someone like wet behind the ears. So I said, I'm not looking for accolades. I'm not looking to overshow anybody. I said, looking for, a good way, a good place to come, have good education for my kids, blah, 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 looking for a job. So the person said straight out, get all the qualifications, very good. Get all the qualifications, probably even better than me. I'm not hiring someone for that. Now, someone else told me, I was interviewing for a different job. And they said, well, I get all the qualifications. You should be in the front line. You should be doing this or doing that. I said, great. I said, find me a job and find me how it's going, that's going to pay. In both cases, probably had way over qualifications, doesn't matter. But in either case, I'm not saying, I was slighted. I'm not saying someone came in the back door and said, don't hire him because, whatever. It had nothing to do with that. But, in either case, what one person said was kind of hard to hear, and the fact that, first of all, I don't want to spend money on that, I understand, but at the same time, someone who's greater than me or equal to me, I'm not looking for. In other words, you want to build an organization? I'm building it. It's my organization. Okay? Yeah, but I'm not looking for someone like that. I'm looking for someone, I can pay less, someone, I can train, someone who's not my equal or not better. Okay. Now, how would a person look at that? How would you look at it? You could say, you could say, well, what does it matter? I have a bigger family or not, or you think I'm much greater than you, or I might be much greater, or I may overshadow, or like, what does it matter? I'm interested in helping grow this organization. Anyway, the answer was no. That was the answer. Now, so look at it and say, what's going on? Got these qualifications. Got, maybe overqualified. Okay. You got good qualifications. Good things. And the answer is no. Now, the knee-jerk reaction could be that, the wrong answer would be, this isn't right. It shouldn't be right over here. Why not? Because the person can say, all you want to do, find a job. You're good at what you do. You want to help someone else out, help build an organization. What's the matter? What's the problem? There's nothing wrong with you personally, right? But they don't want to be overshadowed. They don't, want to pay as much or whatever. Okay. Now you can say, but these factors don't matter. This is what I'm looking for. Very good. And this might fit all my, check all my boxes. Very good. But didn't go. Right? It didn't go. Either case didn't go. Right? So you can look at it and say, why? Why should this happen? They can tell me if I was younger and my kids are younger or I didn't have as many kids, it might be a different story. Yeah. One of the things Murray didn't tell me, like if I have a big resume, you're going to intimidate people. Other people might have told me that. He didn't tell me that. Okay. So he trained me, made me strong as fire, got all this knowledge. It didn't help me in this case. Right? Didn't help me in this case. Now I can say, maybe I shouldn't have listened, maybe I should have done other things, right? You always second guess, right? It's always Monday morning quarterback. You always second guess over here. But what's the bottom line? What's the knee-jerk reaction? The knee-jerk reaction is, why should I not be able to do this? That's the reaction. In other words, if you tell me you're not qualified, got other bad character traits, different things, why they don't want to hire you, okay. Right? That's your own fault. For whatever reason. You have to take those lumps as they go. Okay. But if you have the qualifications and there are other things going on, right, then you have to see there's a bigger picture. You absolutely have to see there's a bigger picture. See, if you don't see there's a bigger picture, then the knee-jerk reaction is, right, I've heard many, many times in many different situations, this isn't fair. You were overshadowed, someone else, took the position, something else happened, right? You shouldn't be left holding the bag. That's the reaction a normal person would have, right? But Torah's not that way. So we have to get the message. We have to understand, okay, this door got slammed shut. Okay. Some other doors got slammed shut. Okay. But we do believe when a door is slammed shut, not slammed shut forever. Yeah, but when a door is slammed, there are other opportunities, right? Other opportunities come along. Now you're going to say, person may say, well, even if that's true, I don't see it right now. I don't see the light, but at the end of the tunnel. Right now, you're suffering and you're going through hardship. Very good. Now, does that mean it's always going to be that way? No. We say, I got to get out of this mess. I need help. Okay. But because the door's shut doesn't mean they're slammed shut. It means it's an opportunity for something else. But if a person's gone on a whole bunch of interviews, let's say, yeah, they've gone through a whole bunch of interviews, and none of them pan out. Now, it could be there's a common thread involved. Let's say, for these interviews, person was called in, they didn't have all, exactly the qualifications. But nonetheless, they felt they had enough qualifications at least to bring them in for an interview. Very good. So if you tell me there's a common factor, we're not necessarily qualified to do this, that's one thing. Right? That is definitely one thing. But if they're qualified, and they don't get it, then there's something else going on. Could you say, okay, you got 50 people applying for 2 jobs? That I hear. Then you can't say, well, it's my fault, this and that. They're going through 50 different people. Yeah? Now, you might get the job, you might not get the job, but the odds are much slimmer. But if you're not going through, a tremendous amount of competition, then why shouldn't you get the job? Again, it might be something you said, it might be something you've done, it might have nothing to do with it. But what's the person going to say after a number of interviews? What's wrong with me? Anybody would say that and say, I don't understand. I'm more than qualified to do this. Did they just interview badly? Did they say something that, the interviewer took a step back? I said, oh, maybe this isn't the right person, right? Maybe a person came in overconfident. Let's say they came in a little bit smug, and they sensed that they didn't want that. Any number of things could have happened. So if there's a pattern, then a person would have to, a person might have to speak to somebody and, and say, okay, what happened over here? Maybe, someone will break it down. How'd the interview go? What did they ask you? How did you answer? What was the body language, right? That you gave over. Maybe it's something you did, right? And if it is something you did, and it's something, that happened a number of times, this is something you got to fix. So when you go in the next interview, they don't have a claim like that. Yeah, that's something you got to fix. Okay. Well, let's say it's not that. Yeah. Let's say a person went to a bunch of interviews and that's not the case. Yeah. So there's something else going on. Right? Not, not every, a person went to 10 different interviews, let's make it easy. That, there weren't hundreds of people applying for these jobs. Yeah. So a person's going to feel dejected over here. Why didn't I get the job? Like, what's wrong with me? Now, if there's something in the interview process you did wrong, good. So that you got to fix. Well, let's say that's not the case. Again, what's the person going to ask? The person's going to ask what's going on. A person does a job, let's say like everybody else, in a certain field. And in that field, other people are making money, making pretty good money, and you're not. So then you got to analyze, well, if I'm doing the same thing as everybody else, and they're making money, and it can work in any market, what's going on here? So either you're not doing it exactly the same, maybe you're veering off, maybe. But if you're doing it exactly the same, then there has to be something else going on. And there's a major X factor. What's the major X factor? Is God himself. God can say, yeah, maybe this is bad for you. I don't want you to do this. I don't want you to be involved in this. Maybe God's going to squeeze you to work on your emunah, right? To work on your faith and belief in him, and you're going to pray better. And then doors will open later. There are, a lot of different scenarios that it could be. But at the end of the day, what's the bottom line? The bottom line is this is not what God wants. And he's stopping you. Now, when you look at it in the bigger scheme of things, you could ask why. You could ask the question, why is this not good for me? This, looks like a golden opportunity. There are a lot of times we mentioned before. There are a lot of times a person sees something that's good, and it seems really good, but really it's bad. Ends up being bad. Or something that seems bad, and it could seem really bad. But in the end, it works out for the best. Right? It goes both ways. So we have to know how to look at things. We have to know how to see, the bigger picture. So comes along Korach over here and he says, not fair. Moshe's playing favorites. There's protexia going on. This is what I deserve. So why didn't he think maybe God doesn't want that for him? Even though he was on a level to be able to hold the ark. Maybe God said, no. I got something else for you. But not this. Now, if Korach was told that, maybe he would have been placated. Maybe. But they don't say, I'm playing second fiddle over here. I'm being given this, but it's not compared to that. Right? It's like, I'll give an example. There are a few honors that you give at a circumcision. One of the honors is the person who brings in the baby, right? Before the father, says Shema Yisrael, and other things, other prayers that he says. So the person bringing in the baby, that's one honor. It's usually for someone who doesn't have children or has had difficulty having children, let's say. Then it can be, if they want to give an honor, they can give the honor to someone just to hold the baby for a little bit, and then pass the baby to someone else or whatever. But the another honor, major honor, is putting the baby on the seat of Elijah the prophet, right? Of Eliyahu Navi, right? And the moil, the one who's going to do the circumcision, will say, "This is the chair. This is the seat of Elijah the prophet." What's the reason you do that? It's because at one point he chastised the Jewish people, and God says, you're looking at them in a bad light, and because of that, I'm going to send you to every bris. Every bris, you're going to go, every circumcision, right? You're going to be there, right? In order to show us, oh, you think my people, aren't good and this and that, I'm going to show you. Look how many people do bris milah. Look how many, even secular people do circumcision, right? So the Gemara says, why? Because they took it on with great joy. So Gemara says, since they took it on with great joy, it stuck through the generations. Even in Russia or the former Soviet Union, people risked their lives to do bris milah, to do circumcision. That's how entrenched it was. Okay, so that's a big honor. The next honor is going to be, which is the biggest honor, and that is holding the baby at the bris, what we call the sandak. The sandak, the one who holds the baby at the bris, when the moil, the one who does the bris, does the circumcision, right? He's going to be the one to hold the baby. Now, you want to take someone obviously that's from, that's religious. You want to take probably a big rabbinic scholar, for sure, or a person will take, father, grandfather, or say grandfather, right? If they're religious, whatever. We don't take someone who's not religious. Right? That many rabbinic authorities hold, because like putting them on the altar. So you're putting them on like a false altar if they don't keep Shabbos, right? Or they don't keep festivals, or they don't keep kosher, or whatever. They're not religious, let's say. And then the other major honor is giving out the name. Is calling out the name. Now let's say somebody knows. Let's say grandfather, secular, pretty much secular, knows what's the biggest honor. What's the biggest honor at a bris? At a circumcision. So at the very least, they know the greatest honor is holding the baby. Right? Is holding the baby at the bris. That's the biggest honor. Now, for the most part, all things being equal, Now, should it, if they have if they have a boy, shouldn't they give that honor to a grandfather? Before this person, before this person's, rabbi or rebbe or whatever. Yes, he should get that honor. 100% should get that honor first. If you can do it. Now, if you can't do it, if you can't do it because they're not religious, let's say, which you shouldn't, 100% you shouldn't. You're going to make fights, but you definitely shouldn't do it either way. Nonetheless, let's say the person understands it's the honor. It's the honor. And now they're slighted. Now they feel slighted. Now you can say, something personal. It's a special thing, but they feel they deserve the honor. They feel 100% that honor belongs to me, or it belongs to the other grandfather, let's say. Yeah? Yeah, so they believe 100% it's coming to me. It's coming to me. And they don't get it. And he gave it to someone else. Now, are they going to be slighted? They're going to be slighted. Are they going to think probably negative things, about Torah mitzvahs? Probably. At the end of the day, can you change that? No. You don't give a non-religious person that honor. You give any other honor. They can put the baby on the chair of Elijah. It's a big honor. They can hold the baby, when someone else gives the name. It's also a big honor. Right? Okay, there are bigger honors and less honors. But this person understands at whatever level, a very small level, but this person understands it's the honor. It's the most important honor. And they feel they and another person have been slighted. You're not going to undo that damage. That damage is going to be very hard to undo. But, a person has to explain, listen, I'd love to give you the honor. Technical reasons I can't. It's something personal. We're going to give you another honor. But this person says, but I'm not getting the honor. See, an older person, what do they have left in their life? What do they fight about the most, when they get much older? Honor. That's what they fight for. They deserve honor. They're older, they're, getting closer to the grave. They should be honored. You can say it's gaiva, you can say it's being conceited. Why the person has to feel that they need honor. But what do they have in their life? When they're older. Can't do the same things. Yeah, many things they can't do, like when they were younger. So certainly in this generation, the older you are, we believe the closer you are to giving Torah Mount Sinai. So you got an obligation to stand up someone over 70. Or pretty much even a non-Jew for that matter, because of the life they've gone through, life experience, even not religious. Yeah, if they're a heretic, okay, it's a different issue, right? But, an older person, you stand up for them. That's a way to honor them. Okay. So you'll say they deserve honor. That's what they want. Right? You give them honor, good. But you know what? Honor is something that is never satiable. Person always wants honor. Yeah. So the older you get, that's all you have. But in the secular world, the older you get, the worse it is. I want to put you out of pasture. The older you are, the closer you are to being a monkey. So they're have respect. What do you have to bring, we're younger, we're more versatile, we learn things better than you, whatever. Okay. They feel they have nothing to contribute. They don't feel like their knowledge or anything they do is worth anything. Because, they're not making money for it, they're not, working. Okay. So what do they have left? They're not respected here. They're definitely not respected in many ways. So all they have left is honor. And if they feel they deserve honor, and they don't get it, it's disastrous. Because they say, it's coming to me. Now, you could say, a person like that's very shallow. Why do you deserve honor? If we say that if a person is looking for honor, they'll never get it. It's the people not looking for honor that honor follows them. Why? Humility. right? When it comes to honor, there's no limit. And the more ego or ego that, as we say here in Israel, the more ego a person has, the harder it is to feed. Meaning that when a person has ego, it just goes up, doesn't go down. It just keeps going up, 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 up. So they feel this is coming to me. The other thing's coming to me. So now, what did you do? You just slapped them. Deservedly so. Don't get me wrong, but you slapped them. Why did you slap them? You slapped them because now their honor's been hurt. They feel like they've been slighted. Again, even if you're nice about it, even if you have a nice relationship with them, very good. In this case, no matter what you say or do is going to help. And what's the reason? Because they feel you didn't give me the honor. Yeah. Now, if they don't know it's the honor, that's easier. Then you give them an honor, they're happy. Right? But if they know it's the honor and they're not getting it, or whatever it is, what happens? They feel slighted. Now, are they going to bear that grudge forever? They feel slighted, they're mad. They could be rip-roaring mad here. Again, no matter how you explain it, what are they going to say? What's their bottom line? Fine, you gave me an honor. Okay. You gave me an honor, but I didn't get the honor. And we deserve that honor. You're never going to win that argument. Right? I'm not going to say damage control. Damage control goes out the window over here. Because once the person feels slighted, it's very hard to convince. Very hard to bring it back to what it was before because they felt slighted. Now, we're gonna see what happened to Korah. Korah felt slighted. Now he's on a much higher level over here, much higher level. But the fact that he felt slighted, after that it went downhill. Then he started, scoffing and mocking. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu fell on his face, right? True humility. He didn't want to see what was going to happen. He knew what was going to happen. And tried to persuade him, didn't work. Got him angry. Made him say things that, like, he wouldn't say. He wouldn't have normally said things. These type of things. Because what happened was, once he got slighted, and once he felt his favoritism, and once he felt, that Moshe Rabbeinu was not looking out for his, for his best interest, he's only looking out for himself and his family and all that, so everything went south. Everything went south to the extent where Korach himself ends up becoming a heretic, which is a mind-boggling thing, right? And the reason is because he started up way high. I shouldn't say started, he worked himself up, and he reached high spiritual levels. And even though he came out of Egypt, one of the 20%, he saw God face to face on Mount Sinai, he held the ark, right? And he didn't die. And he saw the miracles in the desert. He wasn't a dummy by any stretch. But what happened? Jealousy destroyed him. Says in Moshe Feinstein, in a blessed memory, one of the great Torah giants, the last generation in America would have been Torah giant anywhere. And he brings down in Drash Moshe's commentary on the Torah, and he says by Parshas Korach, that's what happened. He made a mistake. He made a serious mistake. Why did he make a mistake? What was his mistake here? His mistake was you look at the world, right? You look at what's going on. You look at what he went through. And all the miracles. And every last thing that he went through. Where is the mistake? Where did he make the mistake? He saw so many things. So many things that should have changed him. So what did he say? Says Rav Moshe Feinstein, he didn't internalize the message. He didn't take it to heart. Or to heart, as we would say. He didn't take it to heart. Okay. Now, the obvious question is, if it happened to him, and he's much greater than, all of us combined here, no matter how he turned out in the end, what's that going to say about us? That we're in serious trouble. Yeah, it doesn't mean we don't have to try. Doesn't mean, we don't have to work hard. Very good. We got our own obligations, no question. Right? Absolutely no question. We also have to work. Right? We're going to have to work very hard. Okay. Now, even if that's true, we have to internalize the message. Because if you don't internalize the message, and you don't think, where our frailties are, and the evil inclination, right, and different things, God can do open miracles, we don't change. And a person may never change. But, if a person thinks, and this is the problem, if a person thinks, I have this coming to me, and it goes south for whatever reason, it'd be worse if you did it to yourself. Then you have nothing to complain about. But if it's something a person seemingly was in control of, and then it goes south, once it goes south, then a person's, rip-roaring mad. Why did this happen? Why did I get sabotaged? Why is God not helping me over here? So you think he's helping you. He's telling you this, he doesn't want this for you. Yeah. But a person can be misled, not for bad reasons. But a person can be misled and say, yeah, this is the perfect thing, whatever. Sometimes God says, okay, I'll give this to you. But it's not going to be good for you. You think it's going to be good. So what looks good could end up being bad. And, and vice versa. How does a person really know? You don't. You see over time, right? For instance, a person will say they did everything to make a flight. They got the way this way, that way, and they just missed the flight. Right? They just missed the flight. So now I have to take the next flight and all the aggravation that, that you have to go through. Very good. Well, then you find out that flight crashed. Right? So you can say, well, I'm glad I missed the flight. I'm very glad I missed the flight. Yeah, otherwise I'd be dead. So a person will see that. Whether they change or not, it's a different issue. But that's pretty clear. Right? It happened to somebody, it's a story. It's a story of somebody that, a lot of different things happened on the way where they missed their flight. Yeah, so what happened? The flight went down. People died and they were thankful. They're absolutely thankful they didn't get on that flight. 2 weeks later, they died in a car accident. It's like God's irony. Yeah, so to speak. They weren't supposed to go on the flight. That's not the way God was going to take them. How did God take them? In a car accident. So, okay. So, in that sense, where a person, everything looked bad, they missed the bus, to a train, to this, to that, there's traffic, whatever it is, they missed the flight, they think it's the end of the world. Yeah, and then they're going to have to wait, and now this. But what happened? The flight went down. Okay, so they're pretty happy they missed the flight. Yeah. Sometimes things are very direct, you see that. But they say, well, I have a new leash on life. So to speak, maybe that was the test. I don't know. I'm just guessing there. Maybe that was the test. God saying, okay, let's see how they're going to react. If they react in a way where, they're thankful, they want to change different aspects of their life, they want to come closer, okay, right? Maybe I'll push off this other decree. But if they don't acknowledge this, and they don't acknowledge that, I saved them, and they don't want to change, then God says, okay, I gave them a chance, right? This was their last chance. I gave them a chance to change. I gave them a chance to look at their lives, to reevaluate. I gave them a second chance at life. They didn't take it. So in this case, I'm just guessing. I'm not saying this is the case, but I'm just guessing here. And then God says, you know what? You didn't change. You didn't want to change. That decree's not going anywhere. So I'll take you a different way. Instead of taking you on a plane crash, right? See, that's going to wake you up. That didn't wake you up. So since that didn't wake you up, I'm going to take you another way in a car crash, right? That they didn't wake up from. That they were killed from, right? So again, on the one hand, they got saved. It didn't shake them. It didn't move them enough, let's say. And God says, okay, I'll take them this way. But he gave an opportunity. Because after 120 years, right, after the person died, they could ask the question, well, I got saved over here. You're right, but God's going to say, let me look at, let's open your file here. Let's see what was going on. I gave you an opportunity. I gave you a second chance. You didn't take advantage of it. You went back to saying this and that and the other thing and it's nature and whatever. And you didn't want to change. You weren't interested in change. So what happened? So my decree stood. I gave you a chance. Imagine someone hears this. I can't imagine, what a person could feel. As a pure soul, that's part of what hell is. It's part of that cleansing process where you're going to feel like a piece of dirt over here because God's going to tell you, look what I did. Look what I did for you. And he didn't change. He didn't do anything. Right? So here with everything, going on with Hamas and Iran and right and all that. So my Rebbe said many times when the government says, look at the army and look at the power and look what's going on, right? So my Rebbe would say that's bad for Israel. That is very bad because we're saying power in my hands did this, not God. So that's bad. That's bad. On the other hand, I was telling people this over Shabbos. On the other hand, if a person acknowledges it's a miracle, and there's no question, even I saw a stat last week about 95% of all these missiles getting knocked down. Okay, they also cause damage, but that's pretty miraculous, no question. Right? No question. Now, Rabbi said, on the other hand, if you admit it's a miracle, then what's God going to ask? The God's going to say, if you admit it's a miracle, what did you do to change? In other words, I did open miracles for you. It's clear. Most of these missiles, whatever, got knocked out, hit open areas. I'm not saying missiles didn't, hit places and kill people. They did. For the vast majority, didn't hit anywhere. The shrapnel's coming down at, 16 times the speed of sound. You have no idea where it's going to end up. And most of them, even in a small country, end up hitting nothing. There are some that didn't cause serious damage. Okay. 95% don't hit anything. It's pretty miraculous. So if a person admits it's a miracle, which is a good thing, which is a good thing, then God can look down and say, okay, look at all these people who admit it's a miracle. But I don't see they pray differently. Yeah. I don't see that they do very much. They do very much differently at all. So God can say, if I'm playing God here, which thank God, I'm sure people are happy I'm not, put on my funny George Burns glasses and my funny mustache, and I would say, I did all these miracles, you didn't change. You didn't change one thing. You didn't change the way you pray. You didn't change your intention of blessings. You didn't change, how much more you learn. You didn't change anything. So God can answer, it's catch-22 here, but God can answer, you didn't change anything, so why should I do more miracles? Why do you deserve, more miracles? So again, isn't it better to say it's a miracle than saying it's the power of my hand? Oh yes, 100%. Right? You put the Jewish people in danger by saying it's the power of my hand, for sure. Right? For sure, that's much worse. But there's another claim here. The other claim is if you're admitting that there are open miracles, that means God did it for a reason. Yeah, it's a wake-up call. And if it's a wake-up call, what did you do to change? You didn't have to do that. You could have missiles hit all over, especially where you live. You could do anything. Yeah. These are all wake-up calls. So God could easily say, okay, I did these wake-up calls. Yeah, I put the fear of me into you. Very good. You see what can happen when a missile, veers off. You can see what happens. Very good. So what did you do to change? What in the world did you do to change? Anything. Right? As my friend, it should be well. teacher in near Israel in Baltimore, and he said after in a I think a drasha before Yom Kippur, the next year after October 7th, or he said it during the year also. There were many, many miracles that happened on October 7th. Yeah, we hear about the horrific things. A lot of the horrific things that happened. There were a lot of miracles happen also. Some more people should have been killed. Right? Without going, I spoke about it whatever before, but without going into that. But he said if God did these miracles also, even though there was judgment, but there were miracles, what do we do to thank him? What do we do to change? Did we do anything to change? That's a scary proposition. If the answer is, especially people living here in Israel, right? If nobody changed, or very few people changed, God could easily say, why'd I do it? What was the purpose of me doing this if no one's going to change? You could say that. And that's also bad. That's also bad. So I was telling someone on Friday, I said, yeah, it's a catch-22 on either side, right? On either side. So as I mentioned tongue in cheek, I said, you can ask if there's anything good to say, anything positive, or it's all negative. One way this way, one way that way. But he's got a very good point, right? It's much worse if you say it's the power of my hand. Much worse. That's absolute heresy. Very good, right? But also God's going to demand if you say it's a miracle, and we acknowledge where it comes from, that means we got to change. Do something. We got to do something to show, appreciation. Show appreciation for what he did. He didn't have to do it, right? But you have to acknowledge it. So acknowledging it is 97% of the game. They're going to say it's hard to change one character trait, like all these things. Very good. We have an evil inclination, and yeah, it's all true. It doesn't matter. Once we see what's going on, and we acknowledge that it's not the power of my hand, we acknowledge where it comes from. Then God's knocking on the door, and he says, okay, what'd you do? What'd you do over here to change? What did you give me? What did you thank me with? When you say Shemona Esrei, silent meditation, whatever you want to call it, you say it the same. Feel like your life's in danger? Did you feel the power? What happens? So you gotta say it. What could a person answer? They get upstairs after 120 years. God asks that question, right? After a person dies. What's the person going to answer? You gotta say, I got caught up in life. Had to deal with other things. Nothing you didn't think about it. You're going to say, God, don't you know it's hard to change? Don't you know you can't, we have an evil inclination? Don't you know, it's easy to get cooled down? Don't you know all the things around that? We give 1,000 different reasons. 1,000 different reasons. What can God say? God can say, survey says, he can knock them all out. He can totally knock them all out. Because essentially he can say, but you didn't do anything for me. You didn't, God says, I know the source of your soul. I know everything you did. I see all your mitzvahs in front of me. I see all your transgressions in front of me. And I see you didn't do one thing to change. Not one. Or, even worse, God can say, okay, I see you changed a little bit. Okay, that's good. Why don't you change more? The catch-22, right? You can never rely on your laurels here. Can't rest on your laurels. Even if you changed a little bit, that's good. Even change a little bit is good. But God can say, but, you had the ability to change more. You had a lot more potential. It's something, was put in my head years ago. And that is, nobody knows what their potential is. So if you don't know what your potential is, you got to work every day. You got to strive. You got to work hard. 100%. Not supposed to be easy. It doesn't matter if we're living in a cesspool of a generation. Nobody knows that the male or female or this and that. You think I'm holding better than most people. Good. So what? Previous generation, you'd be like nothing. Okay. Doesn't matter. We live in this generation. So we have to be the best we can be, regardless of what's going on around us. Now, a person can say, why should we judge more harshly? Look at what's the most important thing some people may ever ask in their lifetime? Do I put ketchup or mustard or relish on my hot dog? That's where some people, very shallow, that's where they're holding. Not holding anywhere else. It's about food, it's about entertainment, it's about sports, it's about all kinds of things. Not about real things. Not about real things. Okay. So you're saying holding better than that. Okay, that's good. That's already, a major step in the right direction. But that's not where it ends. That's not where it ends. That's where it starts. And I have to grow from that. I'm going to make mistakes and, along the way, God forbid. But you make mistakes. Yeah, you go in a direction probably you don't want to in some things. You give into your inclination where you shouldn't. Okay. Isn't that normal? Yeah, that's part of life. That is part of life. But at the end of the day, a person has to remember it's reward and punishment. And once there's reward and punishment, you're going to pay for certain things that you did. For the good, for the bad, whatever it may be. At the end of the day, it's not about just I'm going to fry now forever. The idea is I want to be the best I can be. I want to reach my greatest potential. And reaching a person's greatest potential is not going to come easy. Explain to me, I'm not saying this is the answer, right? When a soul comes into the world, it's here for a message. It's here to do something. It's here to fix something, let's say better. How do we know what to fix? Nobody knows, right? Nobody knows what's going on in their soul they need to fix. So explain to me, I'm not saying it's the answer, but I had someone once say that think of the hardest thing for you to do in this world. Yeah, the hardest thing. For some people, it might be showing gratitude to others. It might be, not saying thank you. It might be, I don't know, working on our interactions with other people. It could be something that you would rather slit your eyeballs with glass than do it. Yeah? So a person explained to me, that's probably what you're doing in this world to fix. Yeah? Probably the hardest thing for us to do. God's not going to give us something easy. This is the last time the soul's probably going to be here, and it needs to be, it's the last time to fix whatever it's supposed to fix up in this world. But we don't know what it is. Nobody knows. Right? Essentially, nobody knows. But it's not going to be something easy. Because once you fix that up, you have no purpose in the world. You fixed up what you're supposed to do, and that's it. God will take you after that. But, it's never going to be something, so cut and dry and so easy. You did it and it's over. Right? It's going to be something that's going to be extremely challenging. Yeah, and this is our last chance, basically, to fix it, to try and fix it. Right? So, at the end of the day, you're going to say, well, if it's so hard, how am I ever going to fix it? Good. You got to try. A person got to try. And if you don't try, and you just give up, you say, woe to me. Okay, so you lose, to a certain extent. But you got to give it your best shot. We're in this world, the Ramchal says, right? In the path of justice, he says, in Derech Hashem, in the way of God, you're in this world to toil. That's what you're here for. You're here to work hard. Now, working hard is exactly the way it sounds. All the trials that we're given, some are easier. I would say some are easier. Some we think, are harder, but are not really that hard. Others may seem seemingly impossible. Yeah, but at the end of the day, as we believe, God never puts a person in a position they can't handle. Now, we may think we can't. We may think this test is really hard, or it's impossible, or whatever. Very good. Very good. If God would put us in a position we can't handle, then he can't punish us for that. Logically speaking, why would he do that? Why in the world would he do that? Then he's going to say, well, I'm going to punish you anyway because, even if it was too hard, so what? I put you in this situation. I want you to overcome it. You didn't overcome it, but it's not fair, right? That you would have an easy claim, right? If that would be the case. You'll say you made it way too hard. It was impossible to overcome. Yeah, good. So you have a case like that. You'll be able to answer that. Very good. What's God going to say, though? God can say, let's say it's not that way. God put us in this, a very hard situation. Or multiple difficult situations. Whether that's to do with health, with family, life, like all kinds of things. All, everything combined. there are going to be two movies a person's going to see when they die, according to Kabbalah. One is exactly what you did in this world, which is what everybody says when they have an out-of-body experience, when they're clinically dead. What happens? They see the life flash before their eyes, right? We create the Mishna in Pirkei Avos says, we'll get there one day, I don't know when, that when you do a mitzvah, you create an angel, right? A positive angel, sometimes stronger, sometimes weaker. When you transgress, you create another angel, a black angel, let's say, sometimes stronger, sometimes weaker, right? We create angels for things we've done. And then God's going to evaluate according to the level you did it, and how many mitzvahs you have, how many transgressions you have, in the weight of each one, and then he's going to judge it. But a person's never going to be able to say, I never did it, right? It's all being recorded, just like we're recording now. It's all being recorded. Now, what's the second movie? Second movie's scarier. Second movie is God's going to show you what you could have done in all these different situations. He's going to show you what your potential really was. Now, most people probably going to be very hard for them to reach the ultimate of their potential. Could be, because potential is limitless. Okay. But we come close. So that second movie is going to show what we could have done. Now that's a part of what Gehenna, of what hell is, because then a person's totally embarrassed too. I don't know how a soul gets embarrassed, however it works, but a person's embarrassed. Why are they embarrassed? Why are they essentially embarrassed? They're embarrassed because they see it wasn't really so hard what they could have done. Even though maybe they themselves thought it was hard, whatever. But they're going to see what should have happened and what the domino effect was. Yeah, or let's say better, what it could have been. That's what we're going to see. Now, why is that part of Gehenna? Why is that part of hell? Why is that part of the fixing up process? It's part of the fixing up process because the person's going to look at it and say, that's really what I had to do. And that would have led to this, and it would have led to that, and and other things. And that's why I had to go to the test. It's going to be an eye-opener. Huge eye-opener. It's going to be embarrassing. It's going to be bad enough we saw what we did. We saw what we did, and you can't deny it. You can't deny you had the hand in the cookie jar. It was there. It's clear. Right? It's recorded. Right? The angel says, look, you had his hand in the cookie jar. You can't deny that. Now you can say what led to it, what happened, doesn't matter. But you did it. You can't say you didn't do it. Right? That's bad enough. Yeah, but to see what your potential was and what really you could have done in that situation or other situations and what it could have led to and who you could have become, that's going to be hard to bear. That is going to be very hard to bear. Because the person can say, well, based on what you went through, you can have all kinds of answers. Why? And what led to one thing to another. It doesn't matter, but you did it. But look at what that potential could have been. Look where that energy could have been used, and you didn't. Right? Essentially, you didn't. So what happens? There's embarrassment. Tremendous level of embarrassment. Now, that's not bad. Right? 100%, that's not bad. Why not? Because that's going to help you in the long run. Right? Embarrassment's a good thing. That's going to be part of what's going to fix up it's going to fix up your soul, and that's a good thing. Because at least then you have a portion of the world to come. But imagine what it's like, if a person, and I'm sure it's happened to everybody, right, at some level, if a person did something where they got caught red-handed. Yeah, and they did something wrong. Whatever it is. Imagine that feeling. What it felt like at that time. You go back, whatever it happened, right? You go back in time, right? Imagine those feelings, what it was like. And the pain, and the crying, and the answering, and all that. Now imagine that multiplied by infinity later. We can't imagine. As the pure soul, at that point, you understand absolute truth, right? And once you're in that world, you can't deny it. You can't deny it, and now you understand. Look what you did. Look what you did to your soul. Look how God's looking at it. Look at the heavenly court. Look at all these things, and now you're like, you feel like you've been broken in half. And now it's 10 times worse. You know, it can't be worse. Like, how much worse could it be than when you get caught red-handed? It could be a lot worse. It could be a lot worse. That embarrassment, whatever we feel in this world, right? You got to multiply it by a lot in the next world. Because again, you're talking about a world of truth. If it's a world of truth and what you did, and you got caught red-handed, can't imagine what the embarrassment is at that point. It should like destroy the soul. It should just like crush the soul. Right? God takes that into account. It doesn't atone for everything for sure, but it is going to help. Right? It is going to help. But when you see it in perspective, we can't in this world. Very hard to see anything in perspective because, again, we're body and soul put together. So it's very hard. Very hard to see things in perspective. But at the same time, if we do understand, even potentially, you go through, Shari Truva, the gates of repentance, Rabbeinu Yonah, and you go through the third gate about the punishment for mitzvahs and the severity of what we do, we get a glimpse. We get a glimpse of what it is. Right? But it's only a glimpse because, you're not in that world. Right? But you feel it. You should feel it. And what, and why it's so bad. And why it's so bad what you did. Right? Yeah, I'll give one example. He says, you transgress a positive command. Positive command, let's say, there's a mitzvah to put on tefillin, right? For guys. There's a mitzvah to put on phylacteries, tefillin, whenever it is. Now, let's say you didn't do it. You didn't do it that day. Wherever you got lazy, I'm not talking about where you're under onus, where it's beyond your control, or you're sick, or whatever. Right? You didn't do it, for whatever reason. Yeah, he says there's no positive command that is not dependent on resurrection of the dead. Yeah. Eating matzah. You didn't eat matzah on Passover. Or you need enough matzah, whatever. You didn't eat matzah on Passover. Positive command, eat matzah on Passover. Yeah. So most people, even if it's hard on their digestive system, they eat it. Right? They could eat it. I'm not saying where it's going to destroy your system and you have to eat something else. I'm not talking bread, but I'm saying, other things, whatever it is. Whatever it is. Same thing. Same thing. Any positive commands that a person doesn't do, right? He says that each positive command is dependent on resurrection of the dead. That's a pretty severe thing. You say, okay, I didn't eat the matzah. Okay, I didn't put on tefillin today. Okay, I didn't do this. What does it correspond to? The severity corresponds to resurrection of the dead. I'm not saying if someone didn't put on tefillin for one day, they don't get up at resurrection of the dead. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying it's not repentance for such a thing. But a person has to understand the severity of what you're doing and the importance of what you're doing. Right? And the effect it has on the person. Because you got to remember, every mitzvah you do strengthens your soul at whatever level, as long as you do it right. Right? Every transgression takes away from that. So either you're going closer to God, or you're going further away. Right? There's nothing in between. So the more we do, the more good things we do, we strengthen the soul. Even though we've mentioned many times, it's at a major disadvantage, right? It's a major disadvantage with the body, because the body comes from this world, and the second a baby is born, always wants physical pleasure. So the soul's at a major disadvantage. But the Chofetz Chaim there says, right? It says in duties of the heart, the mitzvahs that a person does, can strengthen the soul even at the expense of the body. It doesn't make you, you're not going to be like a totally spiritual person, just be a soul and not a body. Nonetheless, even though the soul's at a major disadvantage, it can definitely strengthen itself by Torah mitzvahs. Yeah, even though the body's really in control in many ways, right? But there's a battle there. So the more you strengthen the soul, the closer you are to God, the more difficult the challenges will be. If you give into the body, right? As we always say, you debase the body, you debase the soul. You can elevate the body. You can elevate the body, you make a blessing, right? You elevate the body and the soul, because the body gets what it needs, and the soul gets strengthened. But when you go against that, When you go against that, what happens? You're giving it to the body, not to the soul. So you debase the body and you debase the soul. Again, it's a constant battle till a person dies. All right, we've spoken about this. We've spoken about this many times. But the idea is, I have the ability to draw close. Question is, do I really want it? And how badly do I want it? And what happens when I have setbacks? What happens when there's hardship? Right? And that gets back to the whole thing, because the person can say it's not fair. Life isn't fair. And Korach said, jumping up and down, screaming, it's not fair. I deserve this and I deserve that. What do you deserve? What in the world do you deserve? At the end of the day, why does God give us reward? We don't deserve reward. Yeah. Mishna Pirkei Avos says that if you weren't a lot of Torah, you shouldn't think you're so great because that's what you're supposed to do. That's your obligation if you're a Jew. Non-Jew, okay, you do whatever applies. Whatever applies. Okay. Right? So the whole of was asked, so why do you get reward? Why do you get the hudzi, as I would say? Right? Dixie cup of chocolate vanilla ice cream with a wooden spoon made from a company called Hood. Right? Back in the day in Boston, I'm sure they have them. Call them a hudzi. Very good. So why do you get a hudzi? Why should God give you the ultimate hudzi over here? So it comes along the whole of the duties of the heart, and he says, because God wants to do an act of chesed. It's an act of loving kindness that gives you reward. Do you deserve reward? No. Why should you deserve reward? That's what you're created to do. If that's what you're created to do, well, you're going to say, I demand the hotzi. I want reward. Why? Why should you get reward? That's what you're commanded to do. Yeah, so why do you get rewards? Why do you get the hotzi? Because God says, the Hopes of Love says, because God wants to do acts of loving kindness. And the act of loving kindness, they'll have to give you a reward. If in the bigger scheme of things, you don't deserve reward. Because this is what you're created to do. Very good. Right? But he gives you reward as a chesed. Right? As an act of loving kindness. So, if we're busy looking at what we don't have, or what someone else has, or someone did this and took what belongs to me, obviously it didn't belong to you. Right? It's a harsh reality. But the reality is it didn't belong to you. Why not? Because you didn't get it. The person took it away. Technically, he took it away, but who really took it away? God took it away. Why did God take it away? He didn't want you to have it. Why do you want you to have it? Who knows why? He may think this isn't good for you, so I'm not giving it to you. Yeah? Be any number of reasons. But that's the way we have to look at it. And even though a person might be rip-roaring mad, this person did this, or did that, or whatever the case is, very good. But it has nothing to do with the person. In other words, the person's a straw man here. And we get all caught up in things, and we're mad at the straw man, but he didn't do it. Because God's pulling the strings. That person's guilty for what they did, no question. But at the end of the day, as we said before, God has a lot of messengers. He used this person to get to you. So it's like a person and a dog with a stick. Now I'm saying you should do it. Who does the dog go after? The stick. And we go after the stick all the time. Right? This person did this person did that, but God's knocking on the door. What's the message? He's using that person to get to you, to give you a message. Now, that person may be guilty. Very good. He may have to pay you damages and other things. Good. Doesn't mean he's not guilty. Right? Well, why is it being done to you? Why is this person coming in your path? Because God wants to come in your path. God wants you to lose to this person. Why? If I knew that, I'd be world famous. But God wanted to use that person. Right? But we have to see, we have to see in the bigger scheme of things, God knows what he's doing. So in this case, as we mentioned before, in this case, by Aaron Cohen, God saw fit. He deserved it. He deserved the priesthood and not Korah. But what happened? Korah got slighted, right? He didn't think God had anything to do with it. He got jealous and destroyed him, right? And that's what jealousy does, right? That's exactly, that's exactly what jealousy does. Yeah, I'm going to stop there. Any questions? All right, so no questions. I do this every Saturday, 2:30 Eastern Time, 9:30 Israel time. Anyone has any questions? You can find me on Facebook at Mike Chaim Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, orthodoxconversion.com, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There I got videos on Q&As, Ethics of Our Fathers, Book of Leviticus, which I'm doing tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, 4 o'clock Israel time. You want to send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RBBICHAIMCOFFMAN @gmail.com, whichever good.